I'm no expert on Hispanic heritage or the many cultures spread across Central and South America, but patriotism seems to be a cultural trend. Statistics tell me that somewhere around 19% of the U.S. is comprised of Latinos, and that about 19% of our active military force is also Latino. Some guys really do identify strongly with their heritage and culture, but the military has its own culture, and that's usually why we all get along with each other. Guys in the military really don't care about where anybody comes from. Just do your job. But considering I never really gave it much thought, I will say that I am increasingly fascinated by Latin American history and folklore. One of my friends, Caesar, moved here from Venezuela. He also lived in Panama for a few years. I asked him recently about this, and he said that everywhere you go, people will tell you their chupacabra stories. The way he said it, it seems like it's as common as talking about the weather. Then there's El Cucho, a sort of shape-shifting version of the boogeyman, an entity whose stories seem to be used by Latino parents to scare their children into behaving. There's also this one well-known legend that sends chills down the spines of those who grew up hearing it, and especially those who say they have experienced it. For some, it's in the same category as El Cucho, just a folktale used to make sure kids make it home before dark. But according to people, like these two veterans, this legend is meant to be taken as a very serious warning. If you hear a woman crying, stay away from the water. These are just a couple of true stories of American servicemen who have encountered an entity known as La Llorona. The mist which hangs before you
offers you a choice
to pass through
or to escape.
Beyond it are
Stories
which defy
the explanation
and fly in the face
of what we know to be real,
It is a void of both
reality
and impossibility.
of both fact
and superstition.
You alone are left to discern
what to believe as you pass through what we call the fog of war.
Huh. Just like clockwork.
See?
There she goes again.
I told you. Every night, Sergeant. I'm just glad you're here with me.
Why's that?
'Cause now I know I'm not crazy.
What kind of strange woman goes around wailing like that every night?
Always around 3 a.m. too. Maybe she needs help.
Mental help, most likely. But, you know, just in case, why don't you go check it out? I'll hold down the fort. You try to go find her, and let me know.
Yeah.
Just don't go too far. And get lost out there.
Yeah.
For quite some time, the United States military has maintained a presence in South America. They've got a number of bases scattered around various allied countries where American troops are stationed to train with and support local military forces. A former Army National Guardsman found himself deployed to one of these installations, the Sotocano Air Force Base in Honduras, during the summer of 2019. And doing a quick callback, we've been on this base before in a previous episode about a very large snake. So now we're dealing with this entity. Very interesting. Anyway, this Army National Guardsman writes, I've never experienced anything like Bigfoot or hovering shadows over OPs, faces, UFOs, haunted barracks rooms, etc. but I did have one weird experience. It was the Sunday before Memorial Day when I heard something that reminded me of it. Some kids were playing outside my house, and one of them scraped their knee pretty badly. The scream she made. Dude, I don't spook easy, but it made me stop what I was doing. Imagine the most painful scream, just pure agony. And that's what I heard 4 years ago on a TDY, a temporary duty, to Honduras. I was stationed at Sotocano Air Force Base in the summer of 2019. Being one of the few enlisted, and the most junior, I found myself being voluntold to be put on the night shift. It was pretty boring. My job consisted of logging things that happened overnight, keeping contact with other units, being there in case of an emergency, and roaming around the office building on patrols. Outside of training events, very little happened. I was literally paid to watch Netflix and play Total War for 3 months. As long as the coffee was made every morning and everything was logged, I was squared away. Other than learning how to make coffee and catching up on The Walking Dead and Breaking Bad, I encountered something strange. Now, my shift would run from 2200 to 1000. Around 0300, I would hear sobbing from somewhere outside the office. It would normally last for around 30 minutes, and it would always be a woman crying. Now, I thought I was going crazy until I had to battle track the nighttime trainings. Since there were a lot of moving parts, one of the NCOs would join me for that, and he would hear the sobbing too. Finally, after a few days of this, we had enough of it. He told me to go investigate the noise and report back to him what I found. It was around 03:15 when I walked out of the office. I lit up my smoke and took in a few drags before walking towards the noise. Strangely enough, as I walked in the direction of it, the sobbing seemed like it was going further and further away from me, almost as if whatever was making the noise was luring me away from the safety of our lit office building. I stopped near a shack that had some chicken coops and put out my cigarrillo. Grinding it under my boot, I was scanning the empty cabins for anything, any movement, anything out of place, anyone. But there was nobody other than myself outside. Feeling a bit weirded out, I lit another cigarrillo and took a few more deep drags before walking down the road, still continuing to follow these sounds. I did this until finally coming to a stop by a drainage pipe at the edge of the road. And the noises stopped. I'm not just saying the sobbing noises stopped, but all the noises stopped. The cicadas, the other nighttime sounds, everything. It was as if I had just stepped into a vacuum, like someone just flipped a switch and time just stopped. And I stood there for a while, kind of taking in the silence. What the hell is that coming from? It was creepy as shit, because I was the only person out there, and it was 3 a.m. I felt my hair stand on end, and I ran away from that drain pipe, cigar in mouth, and back to the chicken coops. I remember them squawking at me while I looked back at the end of the road. There was no one there, but the noises had started up again. I could hear everything now. Now I'm thoroughly creeped out. I put out my second cigar, and I ran back to the office. My sergeant asked me what happened, and I told him that we were just hearing the nearby chickens. He seemed pretty doubtful at the time and even laughed it off, saying, "Chickens, huh? Those are some weird-ass birds." And the next morning, nothing was said, and he didn't log it in the logbook. Neither of us said a word about it, until I got home and drilled with my home unit. One of my best friends, we'll just call him Junior, was from Puerto Rico. I told Junior about it over drinks after some drill. He looked at me as if he saw a ghost. And he told me "You didn't hear a woman crying, man, because if you did, then you're going to die soon." I asked him why, and he told me about La Llorona. Apparently, if you hear her wailing, then you or someone you know will die soon or might experience something horrible. Now, that's interesting because only a few nights after I had heard this woman, I was participating in a cross-training event with some Marines. We were sling-loading heavy loads to helicopters at night without any nods, night vision. On the last iteration, sometime between 0245 and 0300, something happened. Now, helicopter blades generate static electricity due to the friction in the air, which means the hookup team on the ground needs to have a grounding man. The grounding man is the most important person on the team. He holds a metal pole against the aircraft to make touching it safe. Everyone on the team needs to be aware of the grounding man. If he lets go, then no one touches the helicopter, because if you do, then the charge that the helicopter generates can kill you. Now, thanks to the instability of the helicopter, our grounding man couldn't get a good ground, and he let go of the helicopter just as I was going to hook up to the load. If it wasn't for my sergeant, I would have been fried. He pulled on the back of my plate carrier, and we both fell back just as several tons of helicopter dipped down to where my head was and hovered just inches away from my face before it rebounded and flew off into the night. I'm not a very superstitious person, but hindsight is 20/20. Considering what I experienced the nights before, and having not heard the sobbing ever again, it certainly sent chills down my spine. Whatever was out there at 3 a.m. in the morning was there. I heard it. My sergeant heard it. Hell, even the other soldiers on the shift with me heard it. But none of us have any explanation for it. No one ever spoke about it. Because, who would take us seriously? If anything, we'd just get piss tested over and over again and our leadership wouldn't give two shits. I know one thing. As much as I love a good ghost story, I don't believe ghosts exist. But whatever was out there at 3 a.m. certainly did. And she wanted to let us know that she was out there. This next story can be found in R.S. Russo's book, Odd and Chilling Encounters, True Stories of the Unknown. In it, a U.S. Marine, writing under the handle Chirio Martinez, recalled something unnerving that happened to him just prior to enlisting. He writes, "It was during the summer when I decided to take a trip to Mexico to visit my family. I was about to join the Marine Corps, so my mother wanted me to go see my family just in case something bad happened. At the time, I was with my pregnant girlfriend who would later become my wife and then ex-wife. Since she was pregnant, I didn't want to leave her alone, so I bought her a ticket so she could come along as well. Her being Caucasian, with blonde hair and hazel eyes, made everyone around my grandma's house curious, and a lot of our extended family came to see the beautiful American girl. After greeting everyone, we all started to talk about what had been going on since we had left. My girlfriend was sitting next to me, having me translate parts of the conversation. One of my aunts, who I knew was into the paranormal, brought up the subject of La Llorona, the wailing woman. My mom quickly told my aunt to shut up since she knew that it would get me both interested and scared regarding it, but I was able to push my aunt to keep on going. I mean, I was going to be a Marine after all, and I couldn't let this silly myth scare me. So she proceeded to tell us about how whenever she would sleep over at my grandma's house, which we were currently at, if she stayed up late enough, she would be able to hear her wails. The wails of La Llorona. My mom rolled her eyes at this point and jokingly pushed my aunt, and then the topic died at that point since one of my other aunts changed the subject. Seeing how serious everyone had gotten for a brief moment, my girlfriend nudged me and asked what we were talking about. I told her the myth of the wailing woman, La Llorona, about how She had drowned her children in a river and was destined to walk along all the rivers in Mexico looking for her dead children. When I finished telling her this, my girlfriend just laughed because she didn't really believe in anything paranormal. Later that night, my parents decided that my girlfriend and I should go and stay at our old house where I had grown up, since we were both adults and needed our space. The house was currently being worked on, so the bedrooms had no doors or working lights. The only doors the house had were the ones that led outside. Once we got inside, we had to use a candle and a flashlight for our light source. I remember we even used a bedsheet as a temporary door to give our room a little bit of privacy, even though we were the only ones in the house. As the night went on, my girlfriend and I stayed up talking, and eventually we both fell asleep. I don't know at what time exactly, but something woke me up. I realized that my girlfriend had stolen all the covers, so I slowly trying to get some back. And as I was debating on closing the window that was located right above our heads, I heard a long wail. I didn't have a cell phone, and my watch at the time was really cheap, so I wasn't able to tell what time it was. But I heard it. It was a long, distorted wail. A woman crying. I could distinctly hear the old raspiness in her voice, as if she'd been yelling for such a long time that her throat was getting ready to give out. I was both excited and scared shitless at the same time. A cold chill then went down my spine, which just reinforced my fear. But what confused me was that her wail sounded as if it was being played through an old gramophone. I don't know if it was the scratchiness of her voice or what exactly, but it sounded like an old, creepy record playing over and over. After listening for a bit, I could make out what she was saying. She was crying her trademark, "Ay mis hijos," or "Oh my children." That wail is what made her famous, not just in the paranormal community, but with most people living in the rural parts of Mexico. The wails then started to grow louder, making it seem as if she was slowly heading towards us. There's a myth that if you hear the wails close, she's actually far away, but if you hear them very far, she might be somewhere near you. My girlfriend started to stir. I don't remember if I woke her up on purpose, but either way, it wasn't the smartest move for me to do, since now she would also hear the wails. She had this kind of incredulous look on her face, and she said, "What the hell is that?" I just motioned for her to be quiet and listen. Hearing the tone of my voice, she knew something was wrong. Another loud wail passed by, felt like it was echoing inside the house. My girlfriend started shaking, clearly terrified of what could be outside the house. My arm was still under her head, and I could feel tears running down her face onto my arm. Each time the wail came, she would shake a little, and I would try to comfort her, hold her close. The wailing sounds continued to get closer and closer. They eventually came to a peak where it sounded as if this woman was right outside our window. And at this point, we were both terrified. Doing the only brave thing I could think of, I pulled the covers over us and tried to remain as still as possible. The wails eventually faded out. But just as we thought she had gone, we heard something viciously fighting and slamming against our outside door. It scared the bejeebus out of us. My girlfriend had grown attached to this stray dog that used to walk around my grandma's farm, so while we were staying there, he would always sleep by the outside door, and he would greet us whenever we left the house. I figured now he's fighting, with another dog or something. The dogs, or at least what we thought were dogs, fought for a good minute, slamming against the door, snarling, barking at one another. And then, as suddenly as this fighting started, it stopped. We were too scared to get out of bed, so we just tried to stay awake for a while to see if we heard anything else, and eventually, we just fell back asleep. The following morning, we talked about what had happened, and we walked outside to find our stray dog. He was always by the door waiting for us, but he was gone. The dirt was clearly stirred up from a fight that had happened the night before, but we never got to see that dog the rest of the trip. This all happened in 2008, and to this very day, whenever I go and pick up my daughter, sometimes I ask my ex about what happened in Mexico, but she doesn't like to talk about it. I haven't been back to Mexico ever since.